Hello, hello, hello. This is Gretch from the I Am CEO podcast, and I have a very special guest on the show today. I have Avi Siegel. Avi, excited to have you on the show.
Yeah, thank you. Good to be here.
Absolutely. And Avi's doing so many phenomenal things. But of course, before we jump into that, I want to read a little bit more about Avi so you can hear about some of those awesome things. And when you know, you know. Avi's entrepreneurial journey began at the age of 6, and he started buying and selling trading cards. And by the age of 18, Avi had managed and run a popular retail ice cream store featured on the Travel Channel. By age 21, Avi has created a secondhand textbook company as well as a dog walking company in Manhattan. In 2017, he decided to follow his passion and use his business management experience, leadership experience, and textbook brain to start coaching small business owners. It was his way to give back to the business community and put his skills to good use. And in 2019, he took over as CEO of Vital Signs, growing and guiding the business through growth cycles and a global pandemic. And I was reading a little bit more about Alvi before we popped into this, and he describes himself as a lifelong learner. And you can probably even see that he devours as many business books as he can, which is always great to hear. He loves playing board games, spending time with his wife and his children. And one of the things that really resonated with me, I was reading a little bit more on something he posted on LinkedIn. He said, think of hard times as your investment. You're playing in time and discomfort for the person you want to become. So, Avi, excited that you get to invest some time with us. Are you ready to speak to the IMCO community?
Oh yeah, what an intro too. Thank you for that. That's fantastic. You did your homework.
There you go. Well, it was easier to read it than probably it was to execute on all those things. So I appreciate you for making it easy for me to have something to read.
For sure, for sure.
Perfect, perfect. So I guess to kick everything off, let's rewind the clock a little bit. I know I touched on it, but I want to hear a little bit more about your CEO story. We'll let you get started with all the awesome work you're doing.
Yeah. All right. Awesome. Okay. So the CEO story. It's funny. You read a little bit of that bio and how I started. Like my journey started at age 6. I'll get more into that. The funny thing is that I was talking with Alberto. He's the CEO of Zumba.
Mm-hmm.
And we were kind of sharing stories because he did a similar thing at age, I think he said 4, where he
Mm.
was literally like leasing out a watch that he had and to friends, and they would pay him. And one day he said the story like his grandfather bought him the watch or something like that. And his mom was like, "Where's the watch?" And he's like, I gave it to a friend to borrow. And she's like, "What do you mean you gave it to a friend?" She's like, "Yeah, I gave it to a friend and he pays me money and then he gives me the watch back." And so we kind of like chatted about these like early moment entrepreneurial ventures where we had no idea this was like
Mm-hmm.
entrepreneurship, so to speak, quote unquote. Um, but it was just a great little moment between the two of us, and it's really the start of the journey, right? Like I feel like when you know, right? I didn't have to figure out what I was going to do in college. Like I didn't have to figure out what I was going to do in my life. I was very fortunate enough to know business was where I was going to spend my time, hands down. So anyway, um, that's just me, right? So I was business since birth, basically.
Mm-hmm.
And you pegged me perfectly with the lifetime learner. I probably hit between 30 and 40 audiobooks a year,
Wow.
just straight business books. Audible is we'll call it a healthy addiction.
There you
I
go.
just, I love it. So yeah, so how did I get started? Let's see. So let's start with vital signs. So back in 2012, I started working for Vital Signs. I joined. Joyce asked me if I wanted to come interview. I said yes. I came. I was living up in New York at the time. Moved down to Maryland for this job, and then really spent the next 7 years climbing the chains. I held every position within the company. Funny enough, figured out what I'm great at, figured out what I'm terrible at. Like
Mm-hmm.
maybe even more importantly. So there was a brief period of time where I was in charge of scheduling interpreters. So I'll even back up. So Vital Signs is a sign language interpreting and transcribing agency. We serve nationwide. I just got these numbers yesterday. We have employees or contractors in 49 of the 50 states.
Nice.
So we really have a nationwide base, and we provide the interpreting and transcribing, facilitating the communication between the deaf and the hearing world for government, college, universities, private sector, and nonprofits. That's mostly where we stay. So I was in charge of scheduling interpreters, and I'm a visionary. So don't
Mhm.
put me in front of um, detail oriented, detail overload work, because what happened? I would just drop like step 7, 12, and 14. And then somebody behind me just had to clean it up. And
Right.
so I got yanked out of that position really quickly. But basically, over the next 7 years, I just moved and moved up the chains and took over as CEO in 2019, um, which was right before the pandemic.
Mhm.
We had no idea what was coming. But I was hell bent on the internal structure of the company. When I took over as CEO, I was like, we're going to focus internally. We're going to work on culture. We're going to work on systems. We're going to work on processes. And it turned out to be the best thing that you could possibly work on during COVID, right? Like, I remember listening to the president of Goldman Sachs give a presentation on how during COVID, they focused on the employees, right? The people
Mhm.
who did well during the pandemic, the people who survived during the pandemic, they also looked internally and they all
Mhm.
started focusing on their employees. So it happened to be the exact thing that we needed to do, to the point where we were in pretty good shape. There were a lot of other interpreting agencies that were not in great shape. There were interpreting agencies that were cutting rates for their freelance interpreters, and we did the opposite. So we wanted to support the community, the deaf community, the interpreters, the transcribers. And so something that we launched during COVID was a program where we would lend money to, we would provide capital to interpreters and transcribers if they needed. We held all of our employees. We didn't drop a single employee.
Mhm.
We didn't lay anyone off. We didn't let go of anyone. We didn't drop anyone's rates, nothing. And then we went above and beyond that, and we said, if anybody is in need of financial assistance, come to us.
Mhm.
What we did is we set up a program where we can give a little bit amount to a lot of people just to help them through the times. So anyway, it turned out, so this internal focus turned out to be one of the best things that we could have done during that time. Um, and so we blasted through the pandemic. We did pretty well, all things considered. So then we just kept moving, and then we really grew from there to the point where we developed and grew a leadership team.
Mhm.
And Avi got the heck out of all the daily operations. I remember I was on a call with my project administrator and my director of ops, and it was just like, Avi's a bottleneck. Avi needs to take the visionary role and
Yeah.
fully embrace and accept that and get out of the integrator role.
Mhm.
And so this, I guess, is really a little bit of a journey of my own uh, growth as a CEO, where I was able to step out of um, all the day-to-day tasks, all the day-to-day operations, really fill the seat of the visionary. And at that point, promoted director of operations Ashley Schreiber, who is absolutely amazing, and she handles all the day-to-day operations. And if I start to get a little too close, she'll kick me out. She'll be like, Avi, here we go, and I'll be like, oh, you're right, I'm out. I'm getting too deep. So anyway, so that's my journey in as a CEO. That's my journey in getting to this point. But then simultaneously, I also decided to take my experience growing businesses, managing people in this leadership role, and apply it to mentoring.
Mhm.
And so for about 5 years, I started mentoring. And it was really anybody who could benefit from my knowledge and experience, right? So my experience was like from birth. Anything I did in business, I ended up at the helm of it, right? Then the knowledge is, I'm consuming knowledge in so many ways. So Audible is one of them, but I also probably spend, somewhere like 40 to 50K a year on my own professional education,
Mhm.
um, just to learn as fast as I possibly can and to not make mistakes if I can avoid them, right? Like, I want to make new mistakes and I want to learn from the people that have made the mistakes so I don't have to make those mistakes. So I had so so I had about 5 mentors of my own at this point, and one of my mentors said, "Avi, you have to start mentoring." And I was like, cool, I'll do that. Right. So I started just, if I heard a business challenge someone's going through, I was like, hey, I can help you. Like I've dealt with that before, or I know like exactly what you should be doing. And you're probably heading down a slightly not so great path. And if you make this change, you'll head down a much better path. And so I just started doing that and I fell in love with it.
Mm,
And I just felt like, I get all these mentoring calls and these individual business owners would have these like aha moments. And I'd hang up and I'd be like, and I'd turn to my wife and I'd be like, this is amazing, right? Like I just helped this person, I just changed this person's business. Like I just totally opened a brand new market for them that they never thought of, right? And so I fell in love with it. I did it for 5 years and I remember having this feeling like I need to do this on a much larger scale, right? Like I've done this as a passion project. If they say you do something for free long enough, it's obviously a passion and it's a business model at that point. Like if you're doing it
mm,
like this, you can make it into a business model. And so I was doing it for 5 years, totally loved every minute of it. Had mentees of mine that stayed basically the whole 5 years. Like I still talk to one person who they were one of the first people I started mentoring, and we're still talking to this day in that same capacity. So anyway, fast forward 5 years, I feel like I've got this information and experience that I just need to get out to as many people as possible. Whoever it'll help, right? Like I don't want to force it on anybody, but if they can benefit from my knowledge or experience, I'll make the time for them. So anyway, I launched Siegel Business Consulting at that point. I invest in this transition from mentor to coach. And then probably within about 2 to 3 months, I was I was at capacity.
mm,
I was turning down clients. I was working probably 60 to 80 hour work weeks. And at that point, I had 2 kids, and I'm a very involved husband and father. Like those are high priorities for me. And so between all of that, it didn't feel like 60 to 80 hour work weeks because I loved what I did. It was my passion. But at the same time, I also knew I couldn't stay there forever. It was
mm,
not sustainable. Um, and so I ended up niching down into basically consultants. At that point, I was working with business owners, like small to, let's say, on the larger scale of small business owners to individual consultants. And I ended up scaling down and basically teaching consultants how to do client acquisition.
mm.
And that was a whole game changer. And so that's kind of where I am today.
Nice. I appreciate you sharing your journey, and especially I love that part about you being a business mentor for so many years and putting in so many time. In addition to, I imagine all the books, podcasts, all those things you were consuming during that time as well too, and how you were able to have so much high growth in such a short period of time. But I think so many times people don't realize that about the journey, that high growth doesn't come just out of nowhere. It's the work and the time, the dedication that you've been able to put in addition to being able to kind of work with the language business as well too, and being able to kind of work with vital signs to, I imagine, again, sharpen your saw, be able to impact and see those things happen.
Yeah, absolutely.
Perfect, perfect, perfect. So I wanted to drill down a little bit more and hear a little bit more on how you're working with your clients for both vital signs and then the business solutions. Could you take us through what that process looks like, and then also what you feel is like part of your secret sauce, what you feel kind of sets you apart and makes you unique?
That's a good question. So on the vital sign side, we work with companies that have interactions with deaf currently
Hmm.
or do not have any interactions with deaf. And so the goal is, let's say if the company has interactions with deaf right now, the goal is equal access communication, hands down, basic human right, right? So we are really putting our foot forward to make sure that that happens. And so we work with companies to figure out what services they should be requesting, how to do it. We do like 101 trainings also with companies where we'll come in and we'll do a training on like, here's deaf culture 101, here's how you work with an interpreter. And so we'll work with them on the gamut of, providing interpreters to also education for, their entire workforce. Then on the other side, um, we have companies that have no deaf connection at all. But at any point in time, they could end up with a communication with somebody who's deaf. And
Mm,
so we provide a service for them where at any point in time, if that occurs, they can get access to an interpreter.
mm,
Right. And so that's actually a really interesting story because um, we didn't always provide that service, but there were companies that were just coming to us and saying, hey, you know, ADA compliance is real. And right now, we have a risk of being non-compliant with the ADA. And we can't have that. Lawsuits can range anywhere from, I don't know, 40K to 400K, right?
mm,
Like probably even more than that. And so they were like, we need to have the capability to provide interpreters in case we ever need one, almost like insurance against a lawsuit.
mm,
And so we created this service now where they can get access to it at any point in time. And they don't have to, now they do not have to worry about compliance when it comes to deaf and hard of hearing with the ADA. And so that was a really cool advancement that we had on that end. And then on the coaching side, I'm teaching well, there's really two paths, right? There's
mm,
scaling and there's client acquisition.
mm,
So right now I'm teaching consultants and specifically fractional C-suite, so like a fractional CMO, fractional CFO, CRO, COO, how to acquire high ticket, high paying clients. So I told you that within 2 to 3 months, whatever it was, I was fully booked up and I was turning down clients. I take that skill and I then teach it to them. And the it's a really interesting story how I even got there, and I'll tell you that in a second. So that's channel number one. Channel number two is really for the consultants and also for small businesses. It's scaling, leadership, and management. And so we have a group where we discuss all of this, and we actually work with individuals in real time on the challenges that they're going through to help them ultimately scale their business.
mm,
And so we've seen, I actually got a text message this morning from somebody. I had asked them just how much have they increased their prices over the last 6 months since working together. And so I sent it to two people. I was curious. The first person said their full service, that's like just a product line, a service line, went up 50%, and their half service went up 30% since we started working together, right? So
mm,
this is like if you scale your prices, you don't have to scale your client base as much, right? Like
mm,
this person is now making a ton more with a ton less effort, right? Because now they're providing a more high ticket item to individuals. They're making more and they're actually spending less time because they're not servicing double the amount of clients, they're servicing half the amount of clients. Um, so anyway, so those are the two avenues we work together on the coaching side. And so the interesting thing is for the consultants, for the client acquisition, for the consultants. So I have two coaches of my own right now, and I had at this time. And my two coaches were telling me, um, I was at this path where I was like, choose small businesses or choose consultants. Now I really have both paths locked down. But at that time, they were like, go to the small businesses because small businesses can afford to pay you more than consultants.
mm,
And something kept pulling me back to the consultants. Something kept like just every time I'd be like, that makes sense. That's logical. Let's go left. My heart and my brain was going right. Like there was something that
mm,
was going to the consultants. I realized afterwards that I was really changing the lives of the consultants. Like
mm,
teaching them client acquisition was the skill that changed their lives, changed their families' lives, created financial freedom. And I'm a big family guy and I'm a big financial freedom guy. And so that was something that just had huge impact. And so I was working at that time, I was working with small businesses and, we were padding top line, padding bottom line. I had owners taking owners distributions for the first time in their entire careers with their businesses, but I kept getting pulled to the consultant world. And so that's how I ended up in the consultant space and also the small business space.
Nice. So I appreciate you sharing that so much. It's so funny. Like one of the words that was kind of popping up for me was this word awareness, and I feel like that kind of comes out through both sides, both businesses, for lack of a better term. Because I think sometimes people, for one, as you said so well, you don't realize that in order to scale, to grow, to generate more revenue, that there is not just more clients. So there's awareness of a different path that you can do that, and I imagine having those conversations is huge. But also like the awareness of how I imagine you help to empower these consultants, they're able to impact these organizations, and I imagine that also probably also helps out the organizations and businesses as well too, in addition to being able to make sure that you're ADA compliant and although just awareness around like things that people don't know, and realize that there can be a better way ends up being like very much so like it sounds like a superpower thing that sets you apart.
Yeah. Yeah, it's awesome. This happened on one of my calls yesterday. I love to open people's brains up. And
Mhm,
usually so yesterday someone came to me and they were like, I have to get rid of this client. And I have to get rid of this client so I can, like, for all the right reasons, right? So I can spend more time doing BD to get the higher level clients. So I can spend more time with the higher level clients, right? This was kind of like a problem client over here.
mhm,
And what I said to this person is said, how can you have your cake and eat it too? How
mhm.
can you change this situation from an or to an and? This is one of the most powerful questions that I ask. It's so simple, right? But it's how can I change this situation from an or to an and? And so then once we just like unlocked that part of the thought process, it was like, oh, I could completely delegate this client to somebody else and it would be a perfect match. This client would be benefited because they're getting the services and they're probably going to get better services and this person will have doesn't have to do BD to get the work. And so now this person's executing, and that problem is solved for this person. And my client now freed up his time and have a solution for him. So it was literally like a triangle of wins all around, right? But the initial thought process was I have to get rid of it. I have to fire this client.
Mhm.
But once we unlock that thought process and say, let's take it from an or to an and, how do we do it all? Right? Because most of the time there is a way to do a lot more than we think. It just opened up all new possibilities. In this case, it was the best possible triangle of outcomes.
Yeah, absolutely. And that ripple effect ends up being so powerful because I think it reverberates in so many different ways beyond, obviously that it just keeps going and going and going, I imagine. And I love that phrase that you said, like opening up people's brains, because I think so many times I imagine with people you work with, or even I imagine that you talk with as well too, um, we get so stuck in the way that we're doing things and that perspective and the things that we're doing actions wise that sometimes we need to have that kind of outside person, for lack of a better term, to be able to say, "Hey, have you even thought about this? Or do you realize that this is an option?" It's like, I never even considered that because I'm just so much in the day-to-day things that I'm doing that I didn't, stop to realize a different opportunity.
Yeah, 100%. I do that all the time when it comes to like lead gen. I get clients who are like, hyper focused on this one thing because this one thing is gonna like provide the leads or it's gonna, provide the clients. And meanwhile, it's like there's 10 things out here that are
Mhm.
probably more lucrative, probably better uses of your time. And so when I find someone who's like hyper focused, I try to realign what they want, let them tell them, like help them take a step back so they can see the whole picture and not just have that tunnel vision.
Yeah, absolutely. Sounds very similar to what you talked about, getting that visionary role, from being an integrator role, doing all those things. While of course it's a value because I imagine it gives you different perspective. It's probably when that visionary role where you had, and I'll imagine clients that have as well too, where you start to think about things differently.
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. So I wanted to switch gears a little bit and I wanted to ask you for what I call a CEO hack. So this could be like an app, a book, or even a habit that you have. Well, it's something that makes you more effective and efficient.
Whoa, how do I choose?
I know, I know. I
Um,
was waiting for this question.
I'll give you a few.
Okay.
Um, the first thing, and this is in no order of importance,
Mhm,
but the first thing is your micro disciplines. So
mhm,
the way that I get 30 to 40 books a year is I have a micro discipline that I like to drive my kids to school. That's a time where I get to spend time with my kids, and that's valuable to me. On the way home, I will listen to my audiobook.
Mhm.
and I will listen to it every day. And that's my discipline. And it just accumulates. You get to accumulate the knowledge, you get to accumulate like the quantity of knowledge that you're putting in your brain. And so that micro discipline has served me so well. It has just opened my brain up to so much new information that's been incredibly helpful. That's one. The second thing is, so over the last few years, I've been blessed with an insane amount of success, and it's like an insane amount of success. I won't jump into it all, but I think that the secret is, people ask me like, what's the secret, right? The secret is engaging with people that have done it before, right? Like I
Mhm.
engage with my coaches and I skyrocket compared to what I would be if I didn't have their brains to pick all the time, right? So finding the people that have done the journey, learning from them, and then really it's always for me, I'm always looking multiple steps, right? Like I'm always 10xing everything. If there's one effort, I'm like, okay, cool. I can do this one effort and that'll get me, let's say, a 5x, but how can I get it to be a 10x? And that opens up your thought process and takes you from linear growth to exponential growth, right? So we've got, finding the people who have done it to learn from. We've got 10xing the hell out of everything and going from linear growth to exponential growth. Um, and then I would say, I love to be the dumbest person in the room,
Mhm.
right? Like, in fact, I had this one education engagement, and I started it. I was in it for about 9 months, maybe. And in the beginning of the 9 months, I was the dumbest person in the room, and it was fantastic. Every single week, I was just learning a crazy amount. This is your sign language here, learning. I was just learning a crazy amount. And at the end of the 9 months, I remember just saying, like, you know what? I'm not learning a crazy amount anymore. I'm helping everybody, right? Like in this group setting, I was helping everybody, and I was, coaching them or, mentoring them, helping them, giving over the information I had in my brain to them, and that was rewarding for me. But that wasn't the avenue that I was trying to give back. That's the avenue I was trying to be the dumbest person in the room to learn as much as possible. So I canceled that engagement and I moved on to a different one where
Mhm.
now I'm again the dumbest person in the room. And I will just sit there and soak up as much information as fast as possible, and then I'll move to the next thing. And so I tend to move through those kind of engagements quickly because I'm thinking the 10x, right? So like most people are thinking the linear model, like they're learning a little bit at a time. I'm like, cool, I learned that, but like, what does it look like up here, right? Like, what does it look like 10x of what that is? And then I just jump and I just start like chasing that. And then even if I don't get that 10x, I'm probably at the 5 or 6x already. And so I've gone so much further than the people who are doing the linear growth. And they've grown too, like not to put that down. And if that's right for people, that's totally cool. But I want a 10x all the time. So those are probably my CEO nuggets.
Nice. I absolutely love those and how powerful it is, especially like I think that last one really touched on the word that came to mind was ego. And I think so many times you have the ego because it could be really gratifying to realize that, oh, everybody's asking you questions and all those things, and you're giving really great advice. And as you said, like, every place has its thing. There's the opportunity that you have to give, and you want to be able to do that to pour into others. But if you're looking for that to be able to level up, that's when you start to realize that this may not only not serve you for where you want to go, but also may not be able to serve the clients, the customers, the other places that you have to give. So by being able to say, I want to be the dumbest person in the room, and then also take those steps to do that, it allows you to continue to level up 10x things, but also I imagine it probably helps to impact your pouring into people as well too.
Yeah, absolutely. I made a cognizant effort that like I'm not going to be pouring into people here because that's not the channel that I wanted. That's not the method I wanted. But I am still going to, be giving back in these other places.
Yeah, absolutely. And it ends up being, so important to be able to kind of do that and understand like each of those steps. I really love the micro habits as well too, because I think so many times we don't realize that there is an opportunity that sometimes we're not even paying attention to. So to be able to find that and create that's lack of a better term system or those habits to be able to make that happen, it creates those exponential growth as you spoke to as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, what would you consider to be a little bit more of what I call a CEO nugget? This is a word of wisdom or piece of advice. It might be something you would give as a habit to your favorite client, or if you hopped into a time machine, you might tell your younger business self this.
Ooh, that's a great question. Um, Man, that's a fantastic question. Um, I think if I hopped in a time machine and I wanted to tell my younger self something, it would be find the people that have done what you're trying to do and just learn as much as you can from them. Oh,
I love
actually,
that.
I have to do one more. I have to do one more.
Okay. Okay, go for
The
it.
other thing I would tell my earlier self would be literally nothing is impossible. And if you think for 1 second that there's something that is impossible, that is the moment where you need to check yourself and check your assumptions, because
Mhm.
there's usually like a mental block and not a physical block, because you really could accomplish anything. But when you put in a definitive or and not and possibility, you lose that.
Yeah, and
You better go
I
on to
love.
the next question before I pop up some more ideas.
No, if you pop up more ideas, please feel free to jump in. But I love both of those, especially because of how, to me, they tie in together. I think so many times we see the world as being X, and sometimes if we want to achieve Y or whatever it might be, one of the best ways to do that is to be in places or be around people where Y is of course possible. And by being able to stand on the shoulders of giants, you're able to kind of see that of course you can do that. And not only that, you could probably do something better. But I think that speaks to of course like blocks we might have, but also maybe the environment that we might be around as well too, and how that may not, as I go back to that phrase, not be serving us for where we ultimately want to be.
Yeah, absolutely.
Perfect, perfect, perfect. So, wanted to ask you now my absolute favorite question, which is the definition of what it means to be a CEO. And our goal is to have different quote unquote CEOs on the show. So, Avi, what does being a CEO mean to you?
Okay, awesome. Um, I'm gonna give two answers, one from the vital signs side and one from the Siegel Business Consulting side,
Okay.
because my role there are very different.
Mm,
My role in vital signs, what it means to be a CEO for me, is providing an amazing place to work for as many people as possible. So employing as many people into an amazing organization where they can also make great salaries and provide for their family.
mm,
Like that, I think, is a big part that drives me as a CEO. When certainly when it comes to vital signs, like I want to blow up vital signs so that we can just create a better place for the world, right? Like we're a mission driven company, so we need to be, getting equal access communication out everywhere. And that's my passion. And as a CEO, providing that environment to work and the means for as many people to provide a great um, to provide for their family, that's really important to me. On the consulting side, really, or maybe it's really part of the same, is teaching people how to create financial freedom, how to um, be black belts at sales so that finance is never an issue for them. They can charge what they're worth, and change the trajectory of their life for themselves and for their families. And yeah,
I love that. And the word that kind of popped up for me is environment. And I think so many times we get more attached to the how than the why. And I appreciate you sharing like both of those kind of definitions and perspective, because I think so many times we can get attached, as you talked about with the sales. Like sometimes we're laser focused on, we got to create sales and opportunities in this way. But sometimes when you create that opportunity, the environment, the awareness, as we talked about, it creates things in a different way. And I imagine in the same time, when you're doing that for the people that are on your team from a vital perspective, it starts to allow that opportunity for them to not only work in a phenomenal place, but also to create that environment as well for their family, and it really tap into that human part. So I imagine both those things, as we kind of talked about, reverberates and create that phenomenal cycle.
Yeah, absolutely.
Perfect, perfect, perfect. Well, Avi, truly appreciate that definition. Of course, I appreciate your time even more. So, what I want to do now is pass you the mic, so to speak, just to see if there's anything additional that you can let our readers and listeners know. And of course, how best people can get a hold of you, find about all the awesome things you and your team are working on.
Yeah, for sure. You know what? I'll just my closing remarks will be, everybody who's listening to this is in a place where they can change their lives, right? Like they have the ability, they're business owners, entrepreneurs, whatever it is, high level executives, whatever it is. I think that one of the most amazing things is understanding that there truly is no limit. You can do whatever you need, whatever you want. Find someone who's done it before you, latch onto them, and then soar. And the growth, the success is kind of addicting, right? Like once you see like, oh, this was impossible, but I did it, then it's like, what else can you do, right? Like what else is supposedly impossible, but really attainable? So that is that. And if anybody wants to reach out to me, Gresham, you can put a link to an email address in the podcast.
Yes.
Okay, awesome. So you can reach out at avi@vitalsignsllc.net, and you can link that in the description. Or you can shoot me a text. I'd love to hear from you. So you can shoot me a text at 301-404-2284. 301-404-2284. And I say text, not a call, because I am in calls and podcast interviews and webinars a lot. So shoot me that text and I'd love to engage in the conversation.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. Thank you so much again, Avi. And to make that even easier, we will have that information, like I mentioned, in the show notes as well, too, so that everybody can reach out and connect with you. But truly appreciate that last point. I think it really hit home with everything that you do. I think you sharpening the saw, continuing to get better, whether it be books, podcasts, webinar, all those things that you're doing to invest in yourself, it starts to create a new reality. And sometimes we don't realize that there are not any limits to what we're trying to achieve. And sometimes we can go as far as a book, a podcast, listening to a phenomenal speaker, whatever it is, to realize that we can't have everything that we want in our lives. We don't have to choose either or. We choose both and better. So thank you so much for doing that, my friend. And I hope you have a phenomenal rest of the day.
Thank you very much. You too. Thank you for having me on this show. I love it.